All right. Hello. So great to see all of you here. Welcome to our next session. Please welcome Karthi, Director of Go-to-Market at GTM Partners, and her amazing guests, Colleen Drop the Hammer and Judith Hammerman. Over to you, ladies.
Thanks, Gina. Welcome, everybody. Colleen, Judith, thank you so much for joining me on this session. And today, of course, we're going to be talking about influencing and implementing go-to-market strategies within organizations. Judith, of course, has been SVP of Cloud Growth at Axiom and, of course, Adobe as well. She's an extremely results-driven, revenue executive. She has a huge track record of leading sales team and delivering. Colleen is currently Senior Director of Sales in North America at Open Sesame. Again, worked up the ranks, very skilled in sales operations, customer retention, sales management, customer management. So let's get down to it. Colleen and Judith, if we can spend the first few minutes just sharing a personal story of how you overcame a go-to-market challenge and barrier, I think that'll really help set the tone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Lots of challenges in go-to-market, right? I think one of the bigger ones that comes to mind is the challenge of leading a sales team in a go-to-market strategy where things aren't ideal, and not in sales are they ever ideal, but how do you continue to do the job that you need to do in times where maybe it is the economy, or in sales, we never think we're getting enough leads, right? We never have enough food to feed the fish that we have. And so that has been a challenge, I would say, since COVID hit and going remote, and how do you energize your team and get them to do those things. And I think for me, the biggest piece is building trust on the team while also making an environment where people can be vulnerable. Because when people are challenged out in the field and they're not hitting their numbers, you tend to kind of get defensive and hold that all in. And being able to create an environment again where I can get the team to trust me and say, here we go. Like we're going to get through this. We're going to market. We're going to be able to overcome the obstacles and challenges that are out there. And it's okay if you're frustrated or you're worried. And I think leading by example, and that has really been something that we've had to overcome on the current team that I'm on. And I'm happy to say that through the process, we've kept the team, no one's left the organization. So I would say that that's a huge success for us. So definitely the trust and vulnerability piece on teams is incredibly important during challenges.
Thanks, Colleen. Judith?
First off, hello, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're located. Thanks for having me here. Everything that Colleen said, right, absolutely would underscore that thinking. I'll put a bit of a different spin on it and talk about something specific. As you mentioned, I was a ex-Adobe, and I think a lot about, how as we've gone through, how at Adobe, constantly like bringing new product to market, right? So phasing out maybe old product and bringing in new product. And I think a lot about one of the things that I've learned along the way is that it's often as we're thinking about bringing new product to market that we think we have everything and we get ready to go forward. And one of the appreciations I've learned, just frankly, over probably the last 5 years or so, is that I'm always challenging myself and the team to think that much more deeply about it. What haven't we thought about? What motion haven't we outlined yet? And I call that out because I really have gained that appreciation for no motion is too small. That you can overthink it, right? Like you really do need to be thinking through every step. Who are your personas? Who do those personas engage with additionally in the organization? Where will you be getting your leads from? What will your script be for your sellers? Like all of that. What are your metrics? All right, metrics. We talked about this in some of our prep session. What are your metrics that will drive your path to success. So that's probably when I have been challenged, it's because I didn't think it through enough.
Thanks, Judith. Thanks, Colleen. So just if we can just talk a little bit and just maybe double click more on what you said, Colleen, about building trust and creating an environment of vulnerability where you can talk about things openly. Can you share like some moments in your career which were sort of pivotal and gave you the ability to become the leader that you are today? Like that moments in your career that defined who you are and really challenged you and positioned you to be who you are today?
Sure. Great question. My sales career has been over 30 years, but in management, it's been over 20. And previously, I was in a different role with an organization. I'm in telecom for 17 years in corporate America, totally different than being in a startup. And I think that I've really come into my own as a leader and a branded, what's my brand as a leader? I always talk about that. And I think it's when I had an attitude shift. And I hate to use the word attitude because it's like, oh, you got a bad attitude. You're like, no, I don't. But it was a shift in not taking things personally and in the attitude that, guess what? I am doing a good job as a leader. And I think as a leader, sometimes we don't think that. And knowing that I have the tools and I have the experience to lead a team, whether that's through triumphs or challenges or whatever the case may be. But really that shift came a couple of years ago. I had the opportunity to work with an executive coach, and having somebody that you can talk to outside of your organization, outside of your everyday realm, where you feel validated and also challenged, right? Like a coach telling you to, I talk a lot about sports because my youngest son plays sports. It's like when you coach your kids at something and you tell them to do something, they're like, no, that's not how you do it. But if a coach tells them, they'll follow the coach, right? And so it just really opened my eyes to, I have a lot to offer as a leader. Do I know everything? Am I the best at everything? Of course not. Good leaders are never the best at everything. They surround themselves with good people. But having that attitude adjustment, like I do have things to offer. I am doing a good job. The team does trust me. There are things I can share. For me, was the most pivotal time in my career. Again, and it's like, I know Oprah says it's like that aha moment. I'm like, I'm enough. I can do it. I'm in this role for a reason. Let's go. So for me, that's what it was.
Amazing. Judith, what were some of those moments for you, those aha moments for you?
Probably the biggest aha moment was when I started operating from a place of I should be a little bit afraid. I should be a little bit uncomfortable. And it was when I really started embracing the discomfort that I started really taking off. When I didn't have to have all the answers right in front of me, because either I knew how to go find the answers, or the amount of answer that we had was enough to keep going forward, or that I simply had enough experience that it would fill in the blanks, or that the team knew how to find the data if we needed to support something, but simply that it was okay to not know exactly what our path would be, only that as a team, we were able to keep it together and we could all go forward in sort of that unknown place. So it was, discomfort with myself, but also making sure that the team was okay being a little uncomfortable as well, which is probably a next layer of, from a leadership standpoint. It goes back to what you were saying about the trust, because, it's only when teams trust that they can start operating in a place of half information, discomfort, etc.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Judith. So now that we've kind of set the stage about your careers and how you grew into a leader, love to get a little bit more tactical and talk, Colleen, Judith, both of you, if you could shed some light. I know both of you spoke about, like, for example, challenging yourself and, no motion is too small. There's no such thing as overthinking. But what are some of the strategies that you've used that have helped you drive growth and impact and really influence go-to-market in your organizations?
Yeah, I think allowing everyone to have a voice. It's not a cookie cutter, one motion is the way that things should be done. And everybody brings something different to the table, and everyone is unique in that. And giving people a space where they can talk about it. They're the closest to our customers. I mean, my frontline managers have the hardest job in the organization, right? They're in the trenches every single day. And I need to hear from them. I need to hear from the salespeople, and having that voice and being able to do that is great. And that's how we've built trust there. I don't always agree with them. They don't always get what they want, but being able to have those conversations is incredibly important. I'm a huge, I think rules are made to be broken. And I say that in a nice way because rules are put in place to protect you. Let's think about it, right? Like wear your seatbelt, that's a rule. Drive this, whatever the rule is put into place to protect you. It doesn't mean you can't stretch the rule as long as you don't hurt anybody. And we've really pushed the envelope, and I am a big believer in that. And if there's a go-to-market strategy or there's something going on in the organization, what I've learned to do is ask for the why behind it if I don't agree with it, because sometimes I can react just off the cuff, and getting a little bit more of why are we doing it this way? Why are we trying it this way? And when I can understand that and kind of in my head wrap my arms around it, it's easier for me, then to take it out to my sales organization and do those types of things. And so I think the lines of communication are key in go to market. Again, not everyone's always going to agree. I mean, you can sit at leadership and not agree. You can sit at senior manager, whatever level, and that's what makes us better. And so it's really important, I think, in any organization, on any team, to have those lines of two-way communication and then follow up. There's nothing worse than when people fill out a survey or they give you feedback and then it's like, well, where the hell did that go? You're like, oh, I'm not doing this anymore because nothing comes back. So communication is key, I think, for any go-to-market strategy, not only on the sales team, but your entire, I know go-to-market's a little bit different within organizations, but it's key that everybody at least understands what the ultimate goal is.
Judith, what are your thoughts? I know you were very passionate about saying that there's no such thing as overthink it before you.
So I'm a big fan of ongoing, regular, cadenced collaboration and interlocks, right? And that helps with ensuring that we've thought everything through. It's probably the other side of the coin from Colleen's comment about making sure that everybody's thoughts are taken into consideration, because that's the way we do it, right? That's kind of our if we think about the why and the what, that's kind of the how we do it, is making sure that we have a regular cadence, a regular time, where different teams can come together to ensure that we're all on the same path and able to deliver ultimately the same number, right? Because that's really, at the end of the day, whether you're approaching it from a sales perspective or from a demand gen perspective or from a messaging perspective, or from a partner perspective, ultimately what we're trying to drive to and go to market is delivering the number in a focused and organized way. So I'm really big on collaboration and interlocking. It's funny because we keep coming back to the word trust, right? But that's essentially, in order to have that, you really do have to have trust. There's a lot of data that supports what happens in high trust environments. For instance, HBR talks about high trust environments, and teams are more than 33% likely to achieve goals on time due to improved collaboration and fewer bottlenecks. And so there's study after study that shows how a high trust environment helps with really three things: innovation, execution, and the ability to change. And so that's, to me, when I think of successful environments, that's it, right? It's can we innovate? can we change, whether that be a small change or a big change, and can we then execute to ensure that, our strategy, it can actually come down into tactics that we can get done every day.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you, Judith. So let's looks like trust is kind of the key theme of this session. So let's just double down on that for a moment, if you'll indulge me. And Judith and Colleen, as we talk about trust, and as your careers have grown and evolved, and you've stepped into larger and larger leadership positions, when reps don't meet their targets, and when certain things don't go according to plan from a go-to-market perspective, how do you have those tough conversations? Can you give us some examples of tough conversations that can be had when there is an environment of trust that is fostered?
Sure. If the trust isn't there, those hard conversations are near impossible, right? Like, it's hard to have the open dialogue and lines of communication. Listen, when you have to have conversations with sales reps on their performance, they know. Numbers don't lie when it comes to quotas and where people are for the month. And so those conversations, organically should be happening. But if that trust is there, again, and I think with trust comes respect. I think you have to have both of those things. And so if I have to have a hard conversation with somebody, number one, the trust piece of it kind of turns into respect. Hey, listen, I'm here. What's going on? I think that's the first question we sometimes forget to ask in a quota carrying role. What is going on? We just had a conversation about how the hurricane was affecting people. Are we asking people that question? How are you doing? And I think that is one tiny little thing that we as leaders need to be more cognizant of when you're starting those difficult conversations, because we're people first and we're employees second. And if we can remember that, those conversations don't become easier, because sometimes it's harder to have a conversation with somebody you've built that with, but at the same time, that respect is there. And again, it gets back to, I'm a huge believer in communication, and nothing should ever come as a surprise. And we, in our organization, we went through a reorg last year. That was tough. It's the first time we did it. So, as we were planning for 2024. And the conversations, like, you get yourself so worked up about it. And then the conversations, when you have an employee that you have either put somewhere else in the organization or have parted ways with, for them to tell you, thank you, I appreciate how you handled this, you're one of the best leaders I've ever worked for. That is like somebody giving your child a compliment. And so again, I think it's establishing one level above trust, which is respect, and also those lines of communication and consistent feedback, consistent conversations. So nobody likes surprise conversations. Nobody likes those, right? And so I think, again, that respect, open lines of communication, and honesty are key in those types of conversations.
So it's funny you should mention that question. So I was recently watching this video by Simon Sinek, and one of the first things he said, for example, when you have a rep, for example, who's not meeting your quota, is more often than not, companies will start with, hey, you haven't hit your quota, without asking the question exactly what you said, which is like, how are you doing? Is like, what happened? How are you personally? And just starting from that really changes the tone of the conversation going forward, because you make it not about the fact that they missed the quota, but how can we help you? Like, are you personally okay? Right.
Right.
So I think that's
Yeah.
like superb. And Judith, would love obviously you've started from Time Warner and worked in large enterprises most of your
Yeah.
career. What's your thought process like on this?
Yeah, and I would say, clearly the more humanity we can bring to work, with our teams, the better we all are, right? So absolutely, agree with everything Colleen said there. I think some other, maybe to broaden it out a little bit more to just overall go to market. I noticed somebody in the chat said, why is it always salespeople who are the sales leaders who are talking, right? Maybe it's because we like to talk, not sure. But, I think about tough conversations. Yes, they can be numbers related, but they can be related to all kinds of things, right? As a go-to-market leader, you can be having tough conversations with your head of product, right? You can be having tough conversations with your demand team. You can be, there's a lot of places where tough conversations can be had. I am a big proponent of Kim Scott's radical candor. I've used it before. I've been trained in it, and I've taken it to other companies. I've really, I'm a big fan of it. And it's that concept of that you care personally and you challenge directly, right? And you challenge directly because you care personally. And I think once people hear the care underneath the question, the direct approach is less threatening, right? Because it's that we're both in this solution together, and we both need to solve this. And I care enough about you. I care enough about the situation. I care enough about our goals in the org that I'm just going to come at this directly. And I have seen it be highly effective in organizations.
Thanks, Judith. Thanks, Colleen. Funny you should bring up GTM, because the next question really is about GTM, and wanted us to focus a little bit talking more about GTM. I mean, as you've grown in your careers and become CROs and heads of departments in your respective fields, how have you worked towards sort of, because GTM, I mean, this has been said more and more in the recent past, is a team sport, right? So what have you done? Like, how have you fostered that, like, sort of breaking down of sort of silos, so to speak, and fostering an environment where these teams can work together rather than in a siloed format, like marketing, sales, customer success?
Right. I think that's always a challenge. And it had been at Open Sesame for a while. And I believe we've made leaps and bounds in that. And it's because you have to let people do their job, right? I'm not a marketer. I mean, I think that I am sometimes when I have to throw a slide together, but I'm not. And I have to, these people are in their roles for a reason, just like I hope that they think that I'm in my role for a reason and can respect that. And so I almost call it staying in your lane to a point. I have to let the people who are signed up to do jobs, whether it's marketing partners, whatever the go-to-market structure looks like within the organization, and focus on sales and keeping the overall company in mind. If we don't all work together as one team, there is no company. So, shame on all of us. But the collaboration amongst the leaders is where it starts, because it's always, it's like our kids watch us. You don't think they're watching, but if you don't hold the door open for an elderly man, they're not going to do that, right? It starts with you. And I think as leaders, we have to set that precedent with the go-to-markets. And again, surround yourself with people that do a really good job to make you look good, right? Like, and that is cross-functional as well, and finding your person in each of those departments and then expanding upon that, I think is incredibly important. Again, sales, yes, always top of mind. I think go to market, you think of sales. We're good at talking, and we're good at, if I have sales reps on here, I'm sorry, BSing, right? Like, that's what we do really well. Putting a slide deck together, oh my God, it is like crickety old. Let's let the marketing team do that. So if everyone's held accountable and everyone does their job and has a high standard, I think it works. I've seen it not work. It's super frustrating, super challenging. We can't make our numbers. And now I'm watching it work and seeing the transition. And it is like, music to my ears. It's fantastic. So, but it starts with the leadership in all of those departments, I feel.
Judith, what's been your sort of experience in sort of breaking down those cultures? And then we can come back and double click on some of the stuff that Colleen said.
Oh, good. I'm laughing. I only just started laughing here because I'm reading in the chat pod. Arsh said, usually the sales marketing directors don't even align, and they expect RevOps to magically fix everything, Right. Yeah. RevOps is sort of like the one that has to kumbaya, right? In that way. So as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, I am a big proponent of interlock, right? And that is, and what it does is it forces having that on a regular cadence schedule. It forces is marketing and sale are we on the same page? Is the partnership and sales group on the same page? Is the product team and the sales group on the same page? It just forces those conversations versus them happening in surprise fashion, a week before the quarter is going to close. And that's when you don't want it to happen, right? You want any kind of lack of alignment to arise early and often, so that you can get ahead of it before it actually impacts the numbers. So that's something that I look at constantly. I have over the years, run different types of, ongoing collaboration biweekly meetings, right? Where it's kind of an all call and one group presents to maybe, groups of 40 or 50 people, so that their ideas and how they're going about something gets put out there earlier. I think the most successful companies that I've seen are those that spend the time to interlock, and not to have interlocks be driven by one side, but to truly have that be an interlock. Both sides coming together, both sides being able to voice their opinion, versus product always pitching to sales or sales always needing to report the number. And it really needs to be the exchange of information.
Thanks, Judith. Colleen, this is so interesting, and I want to cover this a little bit in more detail before we sort of go into some of the, how we can help young people starting their careers, which is one of the things we found at Go-to-Market Partners is just even, for example, changing the name of the meeting, the regular meeting from a sales and marketing meeting to a go-to-market meeting immediately changes the outlook of how things are presented, right? So that's just little things like that. And also one of the other things we really like to advise people on and teach people on, and would be curious to hear both of your thoughts on this, is that to try and almost agree on a vocabulary, for lack of a better word, and like a language almost, that where everybody understands each other, and like marketing is not saying something in one language and sales in another and product in another and CS. And would love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
That language struggle is real. I mean, even amongst just the sales team, we say things differently, right? What we have done the go-to-market. So we've kind of expanded from, it's not marketing, sales, partners, it's go-to-market. But what we've also done is incorporated a stool, a three-legged stool, right? And each one of those, and it starts at our executive level. So we have our senior VP of sales is one part of the stool, our chief marketing officer is another one, and our VP of partners, right? And if one peg of those stools is not working, we wobble over, right? We need all of them. And so we've taken it from leadership into senior managers, and that's our message, that we're a unified front. It is no longer, sales or marketing, and it is here is our go-to-market strategy. We try to get on the same page from a language perspective. I don't think we'll ever get there, but that's fine. But yes, we do need a unified language when we're speaking, but it's been great. Just like you said, that small little change from go to market has made all the difference in the world, because we're no longer siloed out. We're all part of the stool. So,
Judith?
It starts with the acronym guide, right? Like every company needs its acronym guide, and all the new folks need to know where to find the acronym guide, right? So, and that's usually a product driven document. But I think, to Colleen's point, that's expanding more now as the function of go to market has become a more interdisciplinary action. So I am, I am a fan of documentation, and I think every company does have its language. It's part of its culture, and it needs to. We all, whatever we can do to sort of clarify with one another, are we understand, or do we understand the situation in the same way, is only goes toward helping the overall. But yes, I find those creation of those documents to be, that is the way of the org, right? And so really, really important that they get created.
Thank you so much. So just for the benefit of some of the young people who are, watching today, so I mean, Colleen, your career is so interesting. You started at Nordstrom and now you're in B2B tech, right? So,
Wow, it's crazy.
so like, how do you go from just being like a tactical specialist implementer of go-to-market, where you're sort of downstream, to actually influencing go-to-market strategies within organizations? Like, what advice would you give young people?
Yeah, I would say first you have to be passionate about what you're doing. I mean, I couldn't be where I am today, and I've tried to go the individual contributor route, and my passion is just in people and building teams. And so you have to have a passion, and that's not something that can be coached or taught, or we can't give you a course on it. You have it somewhere, and it might not be sales, might not be go to market, it could be anything, but you have to be passionate about it, because when you're passionate about something, it is like you create, excitement. I would say, one of my greatest joys is watching younger people in sales move up. I mean, I have somebody that when I was an individual contributor here was my SDR. She has moved up the ladder as I've moved up the ladder, and it has been so fun to watch. But I think my biggest piece would be stay true to who you are. And that is sometimes really hard to do. And I think as a female, it is even extra hard to do, right? Because I don't see sales as a man's world or a female. We need both, right? Like females bring one thing, men bring another thing, and we need both, but don't try and change who you are, because we need all of it. And there's sometimes when you can be louder and you think, oh, because I'm a female, they're going to think I'm bitchy. It's like, no, it's just who I am. I talk to other females this way too, right? And so I love music, and I always hear people that have gone up the ladder and they're like, well, I just stayed true to who I was. And I was like, what does that even mean? You're very dramatic. But now I'm like, they're absolutely right? You are unique. We are all unique. Will we learn along the way, and will we kind of mold ourselves into who we want to be? Of course. But deep down in the core, what's in your heart is nobody can change that. And don't let anybody change that. Because if you're passionate about it, you stick with it, and you'll go far. And so that would be my advice to the younger generation.
Thank you, Colleen. And Judith, of course, you started at Time Warner, worked through.
Actually, surprisingly, I started in B2B.
Oh,
tech.
did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually think it continues to be the best place to start, is any small company where you have to learn how things get sold to another company through different channels of distribution is a really good way to learn the industry. Anything more simple, everything is more simple than that, right? That's probably the most complex way we could sell. It's certainly more complex than when we sell to consumers. And so kind of understanding that complexity and how sales, revenue, marketing, demand gen, customer success, partners, how all of that works together in a continuous loop, that's critical and foundational. I'd say that certainly stay true to yourself. There's no doubt about that. That's not, sometimes you have to stay true to yourself within the wake of others around you not wanting you to be you. And that's just what it is, right? That's how we kind of gain, to Colleen's point, that's how we gain respect along the way, is we don't waver. But I would say the other part that I'm constantly, when I have to quickly sort of determine whether talent is high potential or not, the first thing I look for is curiosity. I look for folks who always are reading a little bit extra, who are always trying that new application that came out, who are always trying to understand the situation more, who push things a little bit more as a means of understanding. And so for me, that's what I've seen. It's worked for me in my career, and it's what I see where they're, where folks really do get to jump ahead is a constant curiosity, which probably does evolve from passion, to Colleen's point. But because you kind of can't fake curiosity. But nonetheless, that's really something that I constantly look for.
Okay, perfect. We have a few questions coming through. So before we jump into those, I'd just like to quickly wrap up some of the points that we discussed, because I know we're coming in on time right now. So so the big theme, and would love for you to just give closing comments for like a minute before we jump into questions, is obviously trust and respect are the cornerstones of building good, strong go-to-market teams, right? And then within those, what some of the characteristics are is always be ready to sort of push the envelope and break, sort of break some rules, as long as you're not, damaging anybody, and be able to accept that, there are some things you don't know, which is okay, but what you know is enough, and that's why you're in this position for a reason. And then just move from just take the direct approach, but you do that with empathy, like lead with empathy and take the direct approach, and also agree on some sort of a common nomenclature that you can speak to amongst your teams, so that that reduces confusion. And obviously, if you're a young person trying to climb up the ranks, two of the core characteristics are passion and curiosity, and the ability to just constantly evolve and ask questions. Anything else you'd like to add before we jump into questions?
Other than that, was an amazing summary, Carthy. Good for you.
Okay, we have a few questions, and I'm just going to bring up a slide from go-to-market partners, because we're very passionate about helping people go from just implementing go-to-market strategy to actually influencing go-to-market strategy. So I'm going to bring up that slide, and then we can talk about questions for a little bit. So one question that we had from Tracy, thank you. Why does it seem so hard to recruit and retain a diverse revenue organization?
Wow, that's a great question. I think we've gotten better as we've become remote, as most organizations have become remote from a diverse perspective. And I believe it's because when people are in current roles, we don't do a good enough job of training them in skills. So when they do go to another organization, they have those tools available, and they have, that experience. I'm a big believer in street smarts, which to me is experience. I didn't go to college. I'm still, a senior director of sales because I put the time in, and I've learned in each of the roles that I've been in. And so I think that we as leaders need to do better. When people leave our teams, whether it's, by choice or they were gently pushed out, they still need those tools, and you still need to equip them so they can go get another job. And we need to have more of these kind of conversations where young women can be like, I can do that. Hopefully I don't have to work quite as hard as she did to get there, but I can still get there. And so I just think we need to do better in whatever role, whatever position, wherever people's feet are. We're doing our best job to make them better at the skills they're going to need to be successful.
Judith, do you have any sort of insight into that question?
Yeah. So I think a couple things. I think, frankly, there are parts of us, those of us who have been doing this a while, I think have tried to be at the forefront of making those go-to-market roles more diverse. Some of you on the chat are probably familiar with Women in Revenue. It was started, actually, Tracy Eiler here is in the chat pod right here. Tracy, along with some other great women, started Women in Revenue. And so there are organizations outside of outside of your organization that can help you gain those skills. And that is, for lack of a better term, a safe place for you to be able to gain that information and that knowledge and that confidence to be winning in those roles. The reality is that traditionally, those top roles have been filled by a certain type of persona. And, I do think we're making progress, but old habits die hard, right? So it's there are certain parts of the go-to-market function where we traditionally think of one type of person, and that's it. It is helpful that customers are changing, right? So why we probably had a more uniform look of a customer, um, a couple decades ago, the way that the customer, first off, the decision making at a customer has become so much more complex with so many more makers and so many types of makers, that by default the customer base is much more diverse. So that goes hand in hand, right? Because we always want to ensure that we are providing for our customers and setting up our organizations in a way that look like our customer, so that it becomes quite comfortable on both sides. So I think it's a time thing. I think it's an ecosystem thing, and I think sometimes it's just a push kind of situation. I guess by way of example, I had a situation number of years ago where I had inherited a couple of leaders, of which one of the leaders was female and the rest were not. And this person was really underpaid. And the very first thing I did was to ensure that that person sort of leveled up, right? To ensure that that person was getting equally compensated. So, those are small ways that I think those of us who are in leadership, not necessarily a small way, mind you, but those are ways that those of us in leadership are trying to, I think, change the lack of diversity conversation. But it'll take all of us to keep pushing forward. And frankly, I when I look out at so many talented folks with so much curiosity and energy and grit out there in the market today, my gut is that we're not looking at a lack of diversity for that much longer. I think there's some really talented people in the market who are being awarded and applauded and supported, and it's exciting to see.
Thank you, Judith. Colleen, just one final question, which really brings us full circle, and then we can close the panel, which is basically, what advice do you have for someone early in RevOps where being vulnerable about not knowing everything isn't accepted or supported by the stakeholders or people one reports into?
Does anybody know everything? I was once asked when I wanted to get promoted into another role if I had mastered my current role. And my response was, if I had mastered it, does anybody ever master a role that they're in? And yes, I'm in a learning field, but everybody should be learning every single day. That's why we read books. That's why we listen to podcasts. Nobody is an expert in their role. Nobody that you report to is an expert in their role. If they were, they wouldn't need us. So, just keep being vocal, as hard as it is. I've never been in that scenario, thankfully, but just keep using your voice and learning. That's all you can do.
Amazing. Gina, thank you so much. And we're at the end of our session. And if anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out to Colleen, Judith, or anything from me on our LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies, for this incredible session. I mean, as a female in this space, it's empowering, to keep pushing forward and keep moving. So thank you guys for all of your insight, honest and transparent. It was incredible. So now, folks, we're going to head over to our next session on video driving revenue. Should be interesting. We'll see you guys over there.
Bye. Thanks, Gina. Take care.